It's on teaching grammar and looking at input, intake, proceduralization, product process, and skill. Okay, and really we will be looking at the first three concepts more than the other three, because later on we will look at product, process, and skill, and the teaching of grammar as product, teaching of grammar as process, and teaching of grammar as skill. This we will look at later on. Yeah. So basically, what we have done so far is we have looked at this, yeah, this idea or this framework for investigating L2 acquisition. Okay, and I mentioned that what we really want is intake. Yeah, we want intake, meaning to say this is when the students integrate whatever they get exposed to, yeah, in terms of the input, which they understand, which they notice and they understand. This is when they integrate uh, those aspects into their developing language system. Yeah. Okay. So anybody has heard of Salinker and interlanguage? Has anybody heard of that? Those terms? Interlanguage? No. Salinker? No. Okay. So sometime back there was this theory which is called interlanguage. Okay. So in interlanguage, the idea is that when you want to learn a second language, you will develop, um, a system of how you think the language, that second language works. Yeah. And that system will get closer and closer to the actual system of that language. Okay. So the system that you develop is may not be so accurate, but you have to make sense of the language, right? You may think initially maybe past tense is ed for all the words. Okay, so that's your system. Okay, so as you get, as you get more exposure to the language, you will realize that some words use ed, some words are irregular verbs, and they use other forms. Okay, so your interlanguage moves, right? It moves slowly towards the target language system. So the idea is that you form various interlanguages and you move along this continuum where one interlanguage system. So basically, as humans, we do try to make sense of the input that we get. We do try to make hypothesis regarding how the language works. So when we make these hypotheses, this is kind of like the interlanguage. Yeah. So inter between zero system where you have no knowledge at all of the language, to the other end of the continuum, which is complete an accurate system of the target language. So you're moving, you have an interlanguage that moves. Okay, so that's the idea of an interlanguage. Yeah, and behind it is this idea that as humans, we always make hypotheses of how the language works. Okay, so that was really in relation to all this general framework. Okay, and it will also be reflected in some of the other things that I will also be talking about later on. Okay, so all these things, I hope no problems with what they mean, right? Input, output, okay, and the fact that input is necessary but not sufficient, and then you have intake and how you need to convert input into intake, which may involve comprehension and also noticing of the input. Okay, so so we talked about this, and we talked about how presently we are in this approach, yeah, the CLT or communicative language teaching approach, right? And some people may have the wrong impression that when you go for communication, you don't, you leave behind grammar, okay, which is not correct, yeah, because grammar is still important, yeah, despite this choice, meaningfulness, and information gap, reflecting what communicative approach is, still grammar is important, okay, because when we look at what makes up communicative competence, okay, this is the Canale and Swain framework or model, okay. One of the four competencies is grammatical competence, okay, or grammatical competency, yeah. So in order to communicate, you still have to have grammatical competence, okay. So it's still important, yeah. And we also talked about this, focus on form and focus on forms. Yeah. So I hope you kind of like remember the difference between the two, because this is quite important. A lot of people say no more grammar, yeah? Don't teach grammar that much anymore. And really what they don't want is the focus on forms kind of grammar teaching, where you put things in an isolated manner, it's disconnected, okay, and you try to teach one grammatical form after another, right? That kind of grammar teaching, okay, focus on forms, I think most people will agree is not what we practice anymore, yeah, okay. But we still need to have focus on form, yeah. But the important thing is that this is done in a communicative context. So that means there's, uh, it's discourse, it's a text, it's discourse. That means I'm talking to somebody, there's more than one sentence. I may be talking to somebody and he may be replying, it's a dialogue, etc. Or it could be a text, a single text, or even just a monologue, but the sentences are all related to one another, okay. And you look at grammar in that aspect, okay, in that respect, okay. So this is all right, this is what we want to do, focus on form, not forms, yeah. So this is very important, okay. So when people say, oh, let's not focus on grammar anymore, okay, you must understand that this is not what we want to focus on, but this is all right, okay. Okay, so and this is where we stop. So before we continue, any questions?
No, doctor.
No, not yet.
Not yet. Okay, better answer. Okay, not yet. Maybe there'll be questions later on, right? Yeah. Okay. Maybe I can put you in groups and get you to discuss something. Okay, but never mind. These are some approaches that combine grammar and meaning. Yeah. Okay, they combine grammar and meaning. And these are just approaches. Maybe even you can call them strategies. Yeah. One is processing instruction. So in processing instruction, what they try to do is they try to go for form and meaning pairings. Yeah. So a form like ed and what it means. Yeah. So if you can kind of link a form and what it means, then it's good. Yeah. So it's not like we tell them just in order to make past tense, you put the ed at the end of the verb, but you try to explain that what ed means. You try to explain the meaning of that particular what do you call this, affix. Yeah. So this is form and meaning pairings. Yeah, you try to think along those lines. Ing, okay. You focus on the fact that ing means that this is something that is in progress, or this is something that is temporary. Okay, I am walking to school has got two meanings. Yeah, one is it's in progress. The other, it means that it's not going to last. I'm not going to walk forever to school, right? I'm walking to school. It's right now. It's temporary. Or I'm cooking lunch, or I'm cooking for break or fast. Yeah. So I'm not going to cook forever. Okay, I'm just doing it right now. It's going to be temporary. I'm going to end in a while, but at the moment I'm doing it. So this is the form and meaning kind of pairings. Yeah, not so much trying to go for the rules and people don't understand what's happening or why it's like that, but you go for the form and meaning pairings. Okay, and and then there's interactional feedback. This is once again an approach or a strategy. Okay, and it's negotiation and modification strategies by learners or to them, meaning to say by by the teachers to them, to facilitate understanding. So in other words, you can imagine in a classroom, okay, we have to be a little bit patient as the teacher, okay, and we try to, if they ask us a question, if students ask a question, we try to kind of like negotiate uh, what it means or what the answer is through maybe questions and answers that we ask uh, you know the students, through repetitions, also through clarifications, not just people someone ask a question like how do you form ed, okay, and then you just answer, you add, I mean, how do you form past tense, and you just simply answer by adding ed at the end. But maybe you can you can try to get them to you know find out what the answer is, or negotiate or repetition or clarifications. Yeah, clarification request. If somebody says I go to school or I go to school, then you can ask, what do you mean, or are you talking about something in the past? Okay, and then you can kind of like lead up to I went to school. Okay, or you can recast it. Okay, negotiation of form. I go to school, or you mean you went to school. Okay, so something like that. And of course this will take a little bit more time. That's why I'm saying the teacher may have to be patient. Okay, and the idea is that learning that way may actually be more lasting compared to just trying to tell them what the rule is or what to say. It may not be as effective. Okay, so that's an assumption. Yeah, an assumption in teaching. Okay, so of course you have these other things like textual enhancement. If we go back to the framework of how we learn input, notice input, and comprehended input, textual enhancement basically is uh, related to the idea that whatever you want to, I mean, all input, you have to make sure that they notice it. So in order to get the students to notice it, you can enhance the text. Okay, so how do you enhance the text? You enhance the text by maybe, if you want to teach past tense, for example, you can use bold for the ed. Okay, he walked to school, so they read it, he walked to school, but the ed is in bold, or the ed is underlined. This is textual enhancement. If you are speaking, of course you can stress on the ed. I walked to school, so you stress that, and this improves the perceptual saliency. Okay, what does perceptual saliency means? It makes it more salient, which means it makes it more prominent. And because it becomes more salient, or because it is more salient and more prominent, it can be perceived. People can notice it. Okay, so this is textual enhancement. Okay, so this is relying on the ability or the willingness of the student to pay attention and uh, notice it. Okay, so we're trying to help this noticing process. Okay, but still it relies a lot on the students. After all, learning or understanding something, you know it's the learner's responsibility. We can just say something and we hope that they pay attention and they understand, but we don't really know. Okay, so it's really the students that will figure it out and will learn it. So this is supposed to help them by enhancing the text in some way. Okay, task-based instruction. Task-based instruction is basically your instruction is involves completion of task. Yeah, so you give them some task, you give students task to do, whether they are communicative tasks. For example, they have to complete something by communicating with people, and through the completion of the task, they will actually gain the grammar point. Okay, like for example, if you give them the task of, say, buying a ticket, a bus ticket, or whatever ticket, yeah, so they have to figure out what kind of questions to ask, and so on and so forth. And you as a teacher must ensure that as they form these questions, they are using the grammar point that you want them to learn. Okay, so this is basically what focus task emphasizes. Yeah, tasks which require attention to grammar in order to be completed. Okay, so once again, for the teacher, the challenge is to be innovative and design such a task. Okay, it's not easy. You have to think of a task in which, in order to complete the task, the students have to use that grammar point that you are interested in teaching. Okay, it's kind of challenging, but it's innovative as well. I mean, it calls on your creativity and innovativeness. And also you have collaborative output tasks that require interaction. Okay, where the student will have to interact with other people and get things done. And this is, some people talk about pushed output. Pushed output means that there are many students who are maybe shy, or they may be not confident to speak or produce language. So given this kind of a task, they have to use the language to get the task completed, because they need to talk to somebody. So we are kind of like pushing them to produce language. That's why it's called pushed output. Okay. And some theorists believe that it's important to get output, and it's important to push this output from the students. Okay. But this is something that a teacher will have to decide based on the kind of students that they get, yeah, that the teacher gets. So if they feel that pushed output may be applicable, then you have a theory that backs you. Okay, but if you feel that if you try to force the students to speak, they're going to kind of like react in a very negative manner, then maybe you can hold on to this for some other time. Okay, so there are so many decisions that teacher will have to make in the language classroom. Yeah. Okay, number 3 is discourse based approaches. Okay, so instruction of target forms is supported by extensive use of discourse. What does extensive use of discourse mean? It can mean the use of a lot of reading text. Okay, so in other words, because a text is discourse, so you can support your teaching of target forms by getting them to read a lot of text. Okay, depending on the target form that you're interested in. Past tense, obviously, lots of stories. You'll have a lot of stories which have a lot of past tense. If it's something that deals with present tense, like maybe, cooking instructions, because cooking instructions use a lot of present tense. Yeah, and so on and so forth. So you can use a lot of that task-based, text, use of discourse. Okay. And one of the other approaches that is quite popular now is vocabulary or lexical approaches. Okay, and the idea behind that is that a lot of people, they focus on lexicon. Lexicon is words, right, or vocabulary. Okay, vocabulary is let's see, vocabulary is singular, yeah, no vocabularies. Okay, vocabulary, unless you're talking about different kinds, but vocabulary is sufficient. Okay, and the lexical approach is based on the idea that a lot of students, they focus on the words. They're interested in words. They're interested in the meaning of the words. Okay, and there's a tendency in this approach to use formulaic language. It's okay, you know, like good morning, how are you, you know, all these things as a start, initial, you know, to get them to be maybe a little bit more confident. But eventually you move on to words, yeah. And also it focuses on collocations, meaning to say as many words that normally come together as possible. Okay, like for example, um, the phrase "they lived happily ever after." Okay, you know, this is a formulaic language. It's kind of like, you know, you can learn a whole, you can use a whole sentence, yeah, yeah, just to express some sort of some kind of meaning that you want to say. Or collocations like in the beginning or at first, you know, these kinds of things, these kinds of combination of words, phrases, yeah. Um, you know, give, the word give, what does it normally collocate with? Okay, give money, give help, give advice, give what, you know, all these other things. So in other words, when you introduce the word give, then you should also introduce other words that normally occur together with the word give. Okay, when you teach or, you know, use the word advice, you should also use words that normally collocate with the word advice. Okay, so we don't just say advice means, you know what, but you should also use words or tell your students about words that come together with advice, like give advice, ask for advice, okay, and so on. Okay, so you have an entire approach that is called the lexical approach, and this is something that is being proposed by Michael Lewis. Okay, can you hear the rain? Do you hear the rain here? Does it?
Yes,
Does
it's
it?
also
Yes,
raining here.
a bit.
But it's okay.
Okay, doctor.
It's okay. We have thunders here.
Hello. Sorry, there was a call. I had to answer the call. Can you hear me? Because it's raining here.
Yes, we
Yes, I
can.
can.
So we can.
Yeah, you.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so anyway, you know, these are some of the approaches. As I said, the approach is trying to combine grammar and meaning. In other words, it's not just simply focusing on grammar and trying to present grammar in isolated and disconnected manner, in an isolated and disconnected manner. This is where grammar is, you know, thought together with meaning. Yeah. Okay. So those were some of the approaches. This is the comment about noticing the grammar. Yeah. Okay. And this is, I think, something that is important also, because if you read this, it says if learners habitually process language top down, and this is what people normally do. Yeah, when we talk to somebody or when we read something, what we do is we process it top down. That means we go for the meaning. Okay, we're interested in what it means. We're interested in what it says, right? But if we do that, much of grammar will pass unnoticed. Yeah. So intake is most likely to occur though when features of the grammar stand out in some way, and especially when comprehension depends on a certain form or expression being understood. Okay. So this is important to bear in mind. Yeah. Because sometimes, especially if you want to try to teach grammar within some sort of a communicative context, we have to be a little bit sensitive that sometimes the students may not pick up the grammar point because they're really going for the meaning. And you may have to kind of like emphasize the grammar point, highlight it for them. Yeah, so that they don't just go for the meaning, but understand that the meaning is expressed through the use of certain grammar points. Okay, so the importance of noticing, if you look at these bullets, I think this is a description of how noticing is important. If intake is the desired goal, and through intake you integrate it into your language system. Okay, and just by getting exposure to input, it's not sufficient because you really have to make sense of the input. Okay, and at the same time, if you're just making sense of the input, that too may not be sufficient, because if you want to get them to notice the grammar, you have to make sure, I mean, if you want to focus on grammar, you have to make sure that they notice the grammar. Okay, so you have to have some kind of strategy where grammar is given some sort of focus. Okay, so this is the issue. Yeah, and some of the approaches or strategies that we talked just that we looked at in the previous slides talk about things like enhancement, and various other things that can be done. Okay, noticing is the first step to intake, because if you look at the diagram, the framework, input, noticing, comprehending what is noticed, and then only intake. Yeah. Okay. So we cannot process how the language functions if we cannot notice. So this is important. Yeah. We may get the gist of the message, but we don't know how. We don't really know how the message is conveyed to us if we cannot notice. Okay. So teacher's job is to make the grammar point slightly more obvious, more noticeable. Okay, so this is also what to some extent I have been kind of like describing. Okay, learners formulate hypotheses. This is true of all people. Okay, hypothesis regarding how the language works, and they formulate successive hypotheses, meaning to say they may have hypothesis A, and then when they get more input, they change that hypothesis. They realize that, oh, okay, there are other ways to form past tense, not just ed. Maybe you can form past tense by using other words. Or you realize that, okay, you can talk about the past by using words like yesterday, or just now. Okay, these are all hypotheses, right? That you form as you learn the language. Okay, so they formulate hypotheses and they formulate successive hypotheses. Okay, so they do this, it's recurring. Okay, and they restructure, basically, that's what's happening. They restructure a vision of how language works. Okay, so restructuring is dependent on plentiful opportunities for re-noticing. Okay, And this makes sense, I think. Yeah, you can only restructure or reform your hypothesis if you continue to get more input and you continue to get more opportunities to notice things. Okay, so restructuring is dependent on plentiful opportunities for re-noticing. Okay, so that re-noticing acts as a kind of gateway to restructuring. Yeah, the one facilitating the other. This is, taken from Bedstone, okay, Rob Bedstone, which we will be discussing his work later on. Okay, so you can see that what's important is noticing is important, right? And not just noticing, but noticing and re-noticing. At the same time, structuring is important, and structuring is forming their hypothesis. Yeah, they're trying to make sense of it, of the structures. And restructuring, okay? Forming hypotheses and reforming those hypotheses, which we call structuring and restructuring, okay? Building up quite an elaborate knowledge of grammar, yeah? So this is important. These are steps in the process, yeah? So what else is needed? Is it enough to just get input and try to make sense of how it works? Okay. What we need is also the ability to access knowledge efficiently. Okay. Under considerable pressure of real-time communication. This is, if you really want to be a good user of the language, you have to bear in mind real-time communication and all the pressure involved in real-time communication. Okay, so in the classroom, it's a very controlled environment, yeah, very safe environment, okay, because the teacher is very patient, yeah, the teacher allows the students to a lot of time to talk and form their sentences. But at the same time, maybe later on in their learning, the teacher has to realize that if you really want to prepare your students for the outside world, then you have to also include real-time communication. But later on, yeah, later on, yeah, later on. So it's a plan. Yeah, you begin with maybe you know, very controlled kind of language, and then you move on to something which is more natural and authentic. Okay, so all competent language users can deploy language without having to pay undue attention to the language. Yeah, so if you're using the language of and you're paying so much attention to what should I say, how should I say it, in the end you're not going to be able to use the language at all, or you're going to sound very, very artificial, okay, or very, very slow in speaking, right? So what we need is, for competent language users, they need to be using it automatically. And this is what we refer to as proceduralization or procedural knowledge, right? If you remember, procedural and declarative knowledge is you know what it is, okay? Procedural knowledge is you know how to use it, right? So in language, with respect to grammar, declarative knowledge is you know what a past tense is. Procedural knowledge is you know how to use it. Yeah, okay. You can use it very fluently, and that is proceduralization. Okay, and that is automatic processing, and this is what we want from our students. We want our students to achieve. So basically, the whole process of intake is this. Okay, noticing opportunities to structure and restructure, maybe noticing and opportunities to re-notice. Okay, this is where you sort out the knowledge. Okay, and leading up to proceduralization. Proceduralize. That means you organize the knowledge for use. Yeah. So these three processes should lead to intake. Okay, because once you are proceduralizing, you're already using it, automatic processing using the language. It's already part of your system. You've already There's already uptake, it's already intake, it's already part of your system. Okay, you can use it without thinking too much about it. Okay, so a few more slides. Okay, so if possible, yeah, we need to get our students to interact using their own resources. Yeah, and you can think about it. Yeah, you can, for example, get your students to do a drill or even take part in a conversation using words and phrases that we give them. Okay, that is okay. It's useful maybe as an initial stage, but at one point, sooner or later, we have to get our students to interact using their own resources, whatever they know, so that they can kind of try to figure out how best to use things. Okay, and they can try to figure out what they want to actually say. Okay, so somewhere along the line we have to make sure that we can actually see our students interacting using their own resources, not referring to what the teacher said, but using what they know. Okay, and genuine self-expression. Okay, meaning to say they really want to say something, right? Not because the teacher is expecting them to say something, but they themselves really want to say something. Okay, and this is at that point where they try to say something in English to express something that they are interested and they really want to express. At that point, learning English actually has occurred. Okay, because if you're just teaching them some things and they're repeating what you tell them to say, they haven't really learned to use the language, right? Because what you want is for them to use the language for self-expression, for them to say something that they really want to say. Okay, so if they begin to say, teacher, I think, you know, and they give an opinion, that's great. Okay, they're using the language, they can do that. Okay, so that's an achievement, and that's where learning the language has taken place. And of course, as I mentioned several times already, we have as much as possible to try to give opportunities to our students to use the language. Okay, very often what teachers, language teachers do is the teachers use the language. Okay, the students don't. The students maybe repeat what the teacher say, or they maybe fill in an exercise. They don't really have an opportunity to actually use the language. So for us as teachers, we have to, occasionally just stop and think about, are they using the language? Are we giving them the opportunity to use the language? Okay, so this is very important, yeah, because it's going to help them in acquiring the language. Okay, so we are actually going into some form of teaching how to teach grammar in in context, in a communicative approach. And we're going to look at the next presentation, which is about Bedstone's three approaches to the teaching of grammar, which is the teaching of grammar has product, the teaching of grammar has process, and the teaching of grammar has skill. Okay, but I don't want to really present it yet, and I have not put it up on Putra Plus yet, because really for your mid-sem, it's only up to here. Yeah, only up to this presentation. So I don't want you to kind of like get, a little bit anxious about all the other things that will be presented later on. Okay, so the limits to what has been presented earlier, what I have discussed just now, is firstly, we cannot simply give learners opportunities to interact without careful planning or manipulation. So once again, it goes back to the teacher really planning and designing his lesson in such a way where there are opportunities, and when the opportunities are taken, it will help achieve whatever goals the teacher had in mind. So it's the design. Okay. So if he wanted to teach past tense, ed, or irregular forms, then he has to design a lesson where there will be opportunities for the students to use past tense, and will also be something that they will really want to express. Okay, so we have to design a context, we have to design a situation where they will say something like that. You know, they will use some past tense in that manner. Maybe, you know, if you give them a task like find out what your friends ate for breakfast, and they go around and then they ask their friends, you know, and then when they report, they'll be using past tense, right? They'll be saying Yasin ate nasi lemak for sahur, not for breakfast, for sahur. Okay, so they'll be using past tense, right? So the opportunity is there. Is it self-expression? To some extent, yes, because nobody knows what Yasin ate. Okay, so you know, they go find out from their friends and then they report. So they're using past tense rather than just simply having a sheet question, you know, question sheet, or you know, practice sheet where they just kind of like put in the past tense and they don't really, you know, it could help. Yeah, it could help, but we want to go to another level as well, okay, where they're actually using the language for self-expression. Okay, so a lot of emphasis on how well we are able to design the lesson. Okay, if we don't design this carefully, then you know, there's this thing which is called junky input. Okay, whether you believe me or not, there was someone who felt that group or group work or pair work is not useful in learning a language because they feel that it's going to lead to junky input. If it is group activities, then some of the students may not be very proficient and they will be using language that other learners in the group think is correct when actually it's not correct. So this is junky input. Okay, and from junky input, you know, the other students in the group will use it, and in the end, it becomes fossilized and it's difficult to correct. This is what some people believe in. But that's where, once again, the teacher has to be careful. Yeah, teacher has to be careful. The teacher has to be, if it's in group work, the teacher has to be monitoring every group, kind of listening in on the conversation, and checking on the language used, uh, not checking in the sense that you go around and say wrong, that's not the right way to use that word, but maybe recasting, yeah? Recasting, or um, taking part in the conversation and using the word correctly. Okay, that's how the teacher plays the role of facilitator. Okay, so in group work, hopefully when you go out to teach, you give group activities to your students, you're not going to be sitting on the desk in front and shaking your legs. Yeah? You'll be going around and checking on the group activities to make sure that things are going okay, the language used is you know, is appropriate. Yeah, and they're not using the first language to get the task completed. They're using the second language, they're trying hard, etc., etc. Okay, so and not all language forms will be naturally used, you know, so you have to be careful. Okay, and you have to be innovative again. For example, if you want to teach conditionals, if, yeah, what kind of a lesson or activity or task would you come up with where they will use the word if? Okay, so you'll have to think about that. Maybe they won't use the word if, they'll use something else, you know. So you have to think of how to get them to actually use it. Okay? So this is again one a challenge. Yeah? So basically, what we're trying to give our students is opportunities for language use, not language abuse, which means that we have to hold their hands. Okay, occasionally we have to hold their hands and make sure that they are kind of like you know, okay with the language and how they use it, and we're there. If they're not able to, we can help out. Yeah, we can help out by providing maybe words that are missing and something like that. Okay, so this is something that Rob Bedstone uses. Help the structures sink in, not sink. Okay, sink in meaning to say, oh, we understand, we realize. Sink means that we, you know, we drown. Okay, we drown. Sink in is fine. Sink is not fine. Yeah, because when you sink, you drown and you die, right? Okay. Whereas when something sinks in, you understand something. Okay. So this is, you know, it's not just going into the classroom and saying, okay, I'm going to give you the opportunity to speak. So why don't we just talk about this topic, uh, the importance of the internet. Okay, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes to discuss this, and then after this, you're going to come up and present. Okay, what are you teaching? Okay, what are you teaching? Right? Okay, but if you come in and you know what you're teaching, let's say, as I mentioned many times, you're teaching past tense, okay, then you come up with a certain topic or a certain task where they can work in groups, but eventually they'll be reporting using a lot of past tense. Okay, or if it is conditionals, then same thing. Give them a certain kind of task, they can work in groups, and they can come up and talk, you know, using conditionals. Okay, so you must know what you're trying to teach. Okay, yeah. So this is just an introduction into what we will look at in the future. Okay, we're going to look at Rob Bedstone's 3 different kinds of teaching of grammar. One is teaching grammar as product, the other is teaching grammar as process, and the third is teaching grammar as skill. Teaching grammar as product means the emphasis is on the component parts of the language system. That means you can look at the product, you can look at the form, okay, you can focus a little bit more on the form. And this is probably the beginning part. Yeah, this is probably the beginning part. Most students who are not very proficient may require a lot more teaching grammar as product. Okay, but eventually, as mentioned in the slide, you need to get them to be using the language, yeah, to complete tasks and things like that. Then you know the all the kinds of pressure of actual communication. So you have to teach grammar as process. Okay, the intricacies of real-time communication. Yeah, so you have to introduce all these things into the task or into your lesson. Yeah, emphasize the use of language by the learner. Yeah, whereas in product you emphasize the form, in process you emphasize the use. Okay, and teaching grammar of skill is seen by Bedstone as something in between. Okay, so you have to have certain kinds of skills and abilities, and it strikes a balance between product and process. Okay, so this is the 3 different types of teaching grammar according to Bedstone. Okay, he's got a book on it. You see, I don't have it here. I have it probably in my car. Okay, just took it out from my office. Okay, it's a thin green colored book, but unfortunately it's really very expensive. It's about 100 plus, yeah, for that thin book. So it's kind of interesting actually. It's got a lot of lessons in it as well. I'm not going to require anybody to purchase it because it's very expensive. So anyway, that's basically the presentation for today. Okay, just to get a general idea of some of the important constructs or concepts involved in teaching grammar in a communicative, meaning-based situation. Okay. Uh, any already questions? Now you have questions. Just now it was any questions? Not yet. Now mm, do you already have questions? Not yet. Still.
Not yet, doctor.
Okay. So I basically I'm done. I guess I have to repeat what I said earlier when there were not many people in the group. Okay. I'm going to stop share first and just mention that for the test will begin at 9, yeah, on Wednesday, and the test will consist. It's a very simple test. It consists of about 15 multiple choice questions and 3 essay type questions. Okay. 15 multiple choice questions. I think I will put it on Putra Blast and allow you to answer on Putra Blast. And 3 questions also, I will put it up on Putra Blast, but you can download and answer them and email your answers back to me. Okay, 3 questions. Each question, I think the answers should not be more than 1 page. Okay, not more than 1 page per answer. Okay, even if it is less than a page, like half a page, maybe it is already able to answer the question. But I expect maybe about 1 page. I have also, I am also marking your assignments. Okay, I think slowly, yeah, some people have received the papers, the assignments. I put in a few comments, yeah, and the grades as well. So it's out of 10. So yeah, some 9s and so on. Okay, 8 point something, 7 point something. Okay, most of you seem to be working in pairs, yeah, and I hope to get that done by the end of the week. It's a slow process right now during this month. Okay. Other than that, mm, nothing else. Any questions about the test? Easy test. Mm,
So for the test, it's going
okay.
to start at 9 until 12, is it?
You hear? I can't hear you. What were you
The
saying?
test is going to start. The test is going to start at 9 until 12, until the end of the class.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. The
Okay.
test is going to start at 9. I think you better do the what do you call this? The objective part first. The 15 questions, which I will put in from 9 until 9:30 maybe. 15 questions you can finish in 30 minutes. Okay. Maybe 9:40, maybe yeah, I give you extra 10 minutes. And around 9:30, I will also upload the essay questions. Okay, and the essay questions, you will have to probably give it back to me, send it back to me by 12, something like that. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, and there'll be specific instructions now, like for example, how you should write your subject title and so on and so forth. Okay, and personally, I prefer a Word document over PDF. The reason why I prefer Word document is because it's easier to add comments. PDF a little bit more difficult because you have to highlight it first and then you put in the comment. If it is Word document, I just use track changes and I can just put in my comments. It's much easier. So I know some of you may be afraid that I may change things or something like that, right? That's why you give me PDF. Okay, but don't worry, I'm not going to do that. You can keep a copy of your own, of your own work. Okay, but better give me a Microsoft Word document so that I can make comments on it. Easier now. Okay. Okay, I'm going to allow people to leave. I'll stay on for about a few more minutes, 10 minutes maybe. If you have any specific questions, you can ask me. Okay, but if you are okay with everything and you want to leave, you can leave as well. Before that, though, let me just take a photo, right? Okay, so hold on for a while. Okay, I'll take a screen capture of the first page. Okay, okay, hold on. And now a screen capture of the second page. Okay, and that's it. Yeah. So that's it. I'll allow you to leave. If you want to leave, you can go. Okay. If you want to kind of like stay on and ask questions for a while, if there are any questions, you can stay on. Yeah. Next time we meet is on Wednesday. Remember the mid sem is 9 a.m. Yeah? It begins at 9 a.m. Okay. And my suggestion once again is to start with the objective test, objective questions first. Okay. And I'll give you some time to complete the objective questions. Okay. Anything else?
Yes, Doctor, may I ask?
Yeah. Okay, who's that?
Yes, this is Mihiba.
Yes.
Yes. May I ask about the assignment 2? When is the due date?
Assignment 2. I haven't really thought about it,
Yeah.
I haven't really thought about it. I think you go back to the course outline. I think it will say something like week 7, end of week 7. Okay. You can start thinking about what you want to do, but I think the due date is end of week 7, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. So whatever I say right now, at the moment, you have to refer to the course outline because we will follow the course outline because it's written.
Okay.
And everybody has access to it. I don't want to confuse people and give you different kind of information. Okay, so the course outline which says the end of week 7, then second assignment is due end of week 7.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Anything else?
Doctor, I want
Yes.
to ask for explanation for focus on form and focus on forms because I'm
Okay.
quite confused for forms.
Right.
For form, I understood, but for forms, I'm quite confused. Yeah.
With an S. With an
Yeah.
S at the end. Forms. Okay.
Yeah.
So forms is like this is a very old approach. This is a very traditional approach. Okay, where you try to teach one form after another. Okay, maybe you never experienced it, but in the past, even in our Malaysian education system, okay, you look at the English language textbooks, they will say, okay, um, present tense and then past tense and then uh, present continuous and then past continuous and so on and so forth. There's so many grammar points that are taught. Okay, so the implication is that it's like you're teaching one grammar point after another, and the focus is on the grammar. Yeah, so grammar is more important than the communication. Yeah, whereas in the focus on form, what's more important is being able to communicate well. Yeah, but we realize that there will be times when it's important to also focus on the form in order for you to communicate, right? Well, without being misunderstood, right? So that's what focus on form means. Whereas focus on forms, like I mentioned earlier, it's as if you are trying to teach one grammar point after another. Form becomes more important than communication, or is given a lot more priority than communication. Okay, and it's also more important than maybe even meaning. Yeah, so that's what traditional presentation of grammar has been like. So we don't want to do that anymore. Okay, does it
Okay.
answer your question?
Um, so like focus on form with no S, it's more to priority is for communication.
Yes,
Is it right?
yes,
But for form with S, it focus more on the grammar.
yes.
Okay, thank you, doctor.
Okay. Welcome. Okay, any other questions? I'm not going to tell you what the test questions are. So if you're waiting for that, it's not going to happen. Okay, and even if you try to kind of like, manipulate me in a certain way that I will release the question, that's not going to happen also. So so my only advice, I guess, is for you to just go back and take a look at the 4 presentations. We haven't done much, only four presentations. So personally, I think that everybody should get at least 14 out of 15 minimum for the first part, the objective part. Okay, because it's so obvious, and then you also have reference. It's online. If you were sitting down in an exam hall and trying to answer, then you have to try to kind of like remember and understand, right? Okay, for you to be able to answer. But here, I think it's much more. You've got so many resources. You can take a look at the presentations as you answer the question. So it shouldn't be too much of a problem. The essays are also not, I think, not complicated or confusing. It's kind of like straightforward. Okay, you have to just basically understand what the concepts are, what the constructs are, and just kind of like maybe describe certain things. Yeah, that's basically it. Not difficult at all. So it's only like, I think, 15%, right? If I'm not mistaken. Okay, 15% of your grade, mid-sem. Okay. Um, okay.
Alright, doctor. Thank you.
Yes, Shafi, you have a question?
No, doctor. I was just playing with my hands.
Just raise your hands. Okay, I thought you raised your hand. Okay. What kind of signal are you trying to give? Hello, goodbye. Or good or understand? Okay.
Understand? Okay, doctor. Okay.
Okay. Fine. Okay. Any other questions?
No, doctor.
Yes,
No
Mira.
question.
Yes, you have. Okay. You guys can give anytime you want. I'm just kind of like staying because because you're staying. Okay.
You, doctor.
Okay.
Thank you, doctor. Bye-bye.
You're welcome.
Thank you,
See you
doctor.
on
Have a nice
Wednesday.
day. Thank you, doctor.
Thank
Okay,
you,
make sure on
doctor.
Wednesday you come early, yeah. I mean you access Putra Blast early to get it done.
Okay. Thank you, doctor.
Okay, welcome. There's one chat here.
Okay,
Thank
thank
you.
you, doctor.